it was early 2007 that I was teaching in this nonprofit organization. It was called Afghan Relief Organization. I was teaching English to primary students. There was one evening which was Teacher's Day, and there was one girl standing, and she was crying in the front door of the nonprofit organization. I asked her what was wrong. She didn't tell me. I kept insisting that, what is wrong? I may be able to help you. The kid basically told me that her feet were frozen. And I was wondering, why was her feet frozen? How did she come all the way to the nonprofit to learn? Later on, we figured that she had sold her shoes, the ones that were much warmer, to get her teacher a gift, my fellow trainer at the time. And it struck me that, why is it that we are the way we are? Why are we not better? Can we be better? That was the moment that pretty much changed my life. There was one thing that became focus of my life. It was the people who matter the most. So today, I'm going to share an experience, a process that I've learned which can work in this country, and a process that a lot of times is overlooked. One of the things that I do today is reform the economic environment in Afghanistan, the business environment, so businesses can flourish and they can grow. And one of the examples that I can give you is a licensing reform project. At the Ministry of Commerce of Afghanistan, trade licenses previously took 30 days for a businessman to go either to get a new license or renew the licenses. We reduced that by reforming the process, computerizing it, developing a new system to 10 days. Now, it may seem very simple. Well, okay, not 30, 10, it could be 5. But let's see what does it mean when you reduce 20 days of time for businesses. If you look at the number of people or businesses who visit the department every year, it's 8,900 businesses. You saved every single business 20 days. And that is, if you multiply that by 20, that gives you 178,000 days. If you divide it by 12, that gives you about 6,000 months. Okay, let's move further. What about years? It saved them about 500 years. If you count the combined time that we save the economy, it's 500 years. In one more year, it's going to be 1,000 years. And you can imagine how big that can be for the economy. If you take in terms of money, if every single trip costs a business $5, which is very small, it's minimum. You take a taxi, you go to Ministry of Commerce, it definitely costs you $5. That will put you at $890 million in 1 year. That's the amount you can save the economy. And to put it in perspective, that is twice the export of Afghanistan in 2011, 2012. That's the kind of reforms we need to bring if we are to sustain. So today, I'm going to propose a reform model for Afghanistan, a change process, that if we understand these principles and apply them, we can be very successful. The first one is trying to solve the right problem. Now, it does seem common sense. It's very basic. And my experience shows that a lot of the projects that are done in Afghanistan, they kind of overlook this. And I tend to believe Mark Twain's statement, who said that everything in this world is common sense. But the problem is that common sense is not common. I don't want to believe this, but this is just something that we don't take our time, as Anne was saying in the morning, to just go and find out the real problems. So to give you an example, Bamyan. It's a province that we all know, popular for the Buddhas, at the same time for one more thing, for potatoes. Potatoes, about 80% of the population there, to cultivate potatoes. They live off of potatoes. So we thought, how could we help farmers there? One sustainable way was that we could go and give them credit. But majority of people would resist the idea of receiving loans. So we said, okay, it doesn't make sense, because if you give credit to farmers is like blood to humans. Without credit, how could farmers expand? How could they find better markets? How could they increase productivity? So it didn't sound right. So we said, okay, now this mission is bigger than we thought. So we formed a team. We called it Potato Head Task Force. It did sound right at the time, and we were feeling good to be part of that team because we had a mission to change a good province. We established a team, and the approach we took was to focus on the people who mattered the most, the farmers themselves. Because we had to sort this thing out, that why people don't want to have loans. We're giving them money which is very, very cheap. It can help them expand, find new markets, but why? What's the problem? So in order to get to the bottom of the problem, and our trips were quite difficult, this old Russian helicopters that we had to travel to Bamiyan, very scary, but we had a bigger vision. We said, you know what, it's fine. And we were thinking that maybe only half of the time we thought that we could go to Bamiyan and come back safe and sound. But anyway, we moved on, we talked to the farmers from field to field, from farmer to farmer, to find out what is it that's lacking there. We figured that it wasn't the loan that they didn't want, or the credit, or that they didn't need it. It was the structure and the complexity of the loans that were taken before that was stopping them from trying to get new loans. They were paying up to 50% on interest on the loans that they were getting. The structure of the loan, they had to pay their money on the season, forcing them to sell potatoes in the season when there's huge supply and prices very low. 9 Afghanis per kg. Totally not viable. So what we did, because we had flexibility, we got all the information, we got to the bottom of the problem, and that's how we designed a program that today, and this is just a picture of the consultation we had to do in Yakaulang, the farthest district in Bamiyan. Talk to the people in masjid, just sit with them and have a cup of tea. That helped us find the right problem. And this is also one of the fields at the time that we were trying to find out what the real problem was. But today, at the time we started with 7 cooperatives, very small. But today the number has reached to 44, with 22,000 farmers directly having access to credit. And the reason was that we talked to the people, we had a cup of tea with them, we understood the real problem, and then we went about trying to resolve it. And then the second point that really helps when we do projects in Afghanistan, change projects that are, no matter how big they are or how small they are, is curative replication. Now, when you say curative, at the same time replication, it doesn't sound good. You say, well, if you copy something, then how can you be curative in it? But it works. A lot of times when you know the real issues, the problems, and not just the symptoms, the problems, we can't solve problems. And again, I'll go back to my earlier point that it's the people who can a lot of times give you the solutions because they have the most amount of information. But the process of curative replication is something that we have all been doing. The world has been doing it. The Apple computer, I think we all noticed, but how did we get from Apple computer back in the 20th century to this one? To something that is so convenient. It was just one simple process. It was to take what has already been done, try to improve on it, create something new. Again, it's very common sense. Now, in the context of Afghanistan, how can we curatively replicate? Creativity is, of course, a very fundamental part of it. We have to think out of the box. We have to be creative. And then this knowledge of international best practices is very important. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. If somebody somewhere in the world has done something which has worked for them, let's look at that and see how it can help us. So, this model requires 3 things, the curative replication. You need to be creative, You have to have replication capacity, and that's why this education that we get elsewhere or in Afghanistan, the books we read, is going to help. And then the third element is knowledge of our realities, which comes from the people. Without that, it's going to be very difficult. We need that, and that element as well. In one of our projects called STO, Small Taxpayers Office, the two other offices, Large Taxpayers Office and Medium Taxpayers Office, both were reformed. But we didn't need to go and reinvent it. All we did was we thought about the SMEs, the small enterprises who even don't have basic accounting procedures or a document, how our reform could help them and what do they want. And then the third element that's very unique about this process, which can be very beneficial, is to design the project with the people, not just for them. And that's something that will require time, it will require efforts, and at times it may be very risky to go and talk to the right people. One of the successful programs in Afghanistan is the National Solidarity Program, which we all know. They get everything from the people. People design it, people implement it. And I remember a Chicago-based businessman had taught me this, that your ideas will almost always fail. Make it our idea. At the time, I really didn't believe in it. I was like, I have all these cool ideas, I go back to Afghanistan, I'll change things. But having worked for the past 3 years, now I believe in this one. Because unless my people believe in what I do, there's no way I can change things. So let me give an example of improving home ownership in Afghanistan. To give you a sense of how big this sector is, I'll give you some numbers. So we know the Kabul population is 5 million people. With an annual growth rate of 4.5%, that gives you 230,000 people added to the population every year. Okay, now 7 people per family, how many families are added annually? That's about 32,000 families added annually only in Kabul. And then say half of that population, they will just fit in the houses that we already have, the homes that we already have. So that leaves us with 16,000 people who need homes. Okay, now we know the prices in Kabul. The minimum you'll have to pay for a house is $50,000. It's very minimum. We know how we have houses up to 300, 400, $500,000. But if you take $50,000, multiply it by the 16,000, that's about $821 million needed for the new housing annually only in Kabul. Now you can imagine how big that can be all over Afghanistan. So we knew that we needed to do something for the housing sector. But then for the details of it, we had to go beyond our offices. And we did a research which clarified something that was really important. And it was to develop products for the country that are Sharia compliant. An absolute 93% of the population in 5 main cities of Afghanistan, Jalalabad, Kabul, Mazar, Herat, and Kandahar, they said we would only borrow on credit, which is the mortgage. It's very common elsewhere. If you have a good job, if you have a good salary, you can just get a home on credit and pay it off. But only 7% would be willing to buy on non-Sharia basis. Very fundamental information. And also we figure that about 80% of the population have income below $50,000. So how could you develop a mortgage system where majority of the population could participate, they could have their own homes, but at the same time be able to pay it, and the sector sustains? That made the case for low-income housing. But the only thing we didn't have to worry was this one. This is something that we didn't have to worry because we don't have to deal with him anymore. It's just the side effects of having a mortgage industry that people like him maybe just kicked out of their cage. But regardless, so now our hope is that, again, going back to the people, getting the right information from them, helped us design a better product for development of mortgage in Afghanistan. And we hope that by our project and a number of people who are working with us, we will have a sustainable mortgage industry in Afghanistan, where people can buy homes on credit. You don't have to work 10 years, add up your money, make $100,000 or $50,000, then go and buy a home. It's very difficult. And then the fourth element to this process of bringing change is to identify who is the driving force for your project, no matter how big or small. It could be just developing community, small project, talking to kids at the school. It's very important. One of the things that is, again, a very challenging area for Afghanistan is land management. We have huge land. Of course, a lot of it covered by mountains, but even the ones that are not covered, we're still not utilizing it at its potential. So what a lot of people worked on, the organization I currently work for, and I've been recently involved with, is to establish Afghanistan's Arazi, which is the Afghanistan Land Authority, for commercial purposes. And Arazi, basically, the achievement they had is enormous. More than 1,200 leases that they have made. They have leased out 9,400 hectares of land for commercial purposes. And then more important than that, because there's land available to businesses, now a total of $436 million cumulatively has been invested because of this facilitation. And that's huge, and people don't hear about that. And also, more important than that, is that a total of more than 10,000 jobs has been facilitated through Arazi because they give lands to businesses and they have made the investments. So basically, in a nutshell, the process has, I would call this a 4+1 process. And what it means is the four elements that we have: identify the right problem, creatively replicate, understanding the international practices, at the same time being people-centric when you design it, like the mortgage one, get the information. And then the last component, to have the right driving force. But that +1 is really important, our people. If you have that at the center, our projects can be very successful. And that's what I'm advocating for as many projects as you do, no matter how small or how big. If we have the people at the center, we can succeed. Now, about the group of people I talk about, there's certain characteristics about it that I think are very important when we do our projects. One is the rise of the new generation. As a proud member of Afghanistan 1400, which the 1400 stands for the year 1400 of where the new century will begin. The group has been established, and our aim is basically to be involved in politics, to be involved in civil society, to take the lead, to take responsibility, and to build this nation. And that's really important. And there are a lot of people who have that vision among us. And then there's one small thing about the new generation. We joke about this around a lot of times. That we are told, how do you think you're the future? They tell us, the new generation is the future of Afghanistan. But now I believe, and a lot of people like me, that the new generation is not just the future. They're also the present. And they can do that. Sometimes I do workshops around. What other element that I see in the population is a very strong change mentality. And that is that every single person I talk to, they have an idea for change. They say, I want to do a basic school. Everybody is prepared to change for the better. And that's what I think will rise this nation. Earlier the question was asked, what inspires you? What's your hope? To me, the face of an Afghan. That inspires me. And I want to leave you just with one statement that always helps me. And I see Afghans, and I always ask myself, why not better? And why not best? I never find an answer for that, to believe in it, that we cannot be better. And that inspires me. It inspires me to keep going, it inspires me to work. And I hope that you also see the same thing. Thank you. Thank you, Jesse.